Joining us for the YWCA Stand Against Racism, Domestic Violence in a Time of Crisis. I'm Michelle Mallory Johnson, Senior Director of Communications and Advocacy for YWCA Nashville and Middle Tennessee. We appreciate everyone who's joined us. Our Stand Against Racism webinar series is made possible in part thanks to Regions Foundation of Tennessee. We have the pleasure of having LaToya Jemison, Senior Vice President, Regional Community Development and Partnerships Manager for Regions Bank, join us today. LaToya is not only a past AWA honoree, but longtime friend and supporter of the YWCA. Welcome, LaToya.
Good afternoon and welcome to today's program. Thank you all so much for joining us. As Michelle said, I'm LaToya Jemison and I'm with Regions Bank, Regional Community Development Manager, and also the COO of the Regions Foundation of Tennessee. And we are proud partners of the YWCA of Nashville and Middle Tennessee. Regions Bank supports the Domestic Violence Center annually, and Regions Foundation of Tennessee is proud to step up and be the presenting sponsor for Stand Up Against Racism webinar series. YWCA USA established Stand Against Racism to build community among those who work for racial justice and to raise awareness about the negative impact of institutional and structural racism in our communities. It is a part of the strategy of the YWCA's work to eliminate racism. Locally, the YWCA of Nashville and Middle Tennessee expanded its commitment to address this important subject a few years ago. October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. Today, our expert panel will address the parallel and intersecting traumas from both racism and domestic violence, and what we can do to repair this harm. Our moderator for today's program is LaToya Townsend. Thank you for being with us. LaToya is the Director of Training, Outreach, and Development at Metro Nashville's Office of Family Safety. LaToya is an experienced consultant, speaker, trainer, grant manager, and writer. She is passionate about promoting awareness of intersectionality and impact it has on African-American women who experience gender violence. As a seasoned trainer for over 11 years, LaToya has worked extensively on developing training materials that highlight the barriers marginalized communities face while experiencing domestic and sexual violence. Thanks to all the panelists for participating. Thank you, YW, for offering this important information for our community. And LaToya, again, thank you for your participation. I'll now turn it over to you.
Oh, no.
But we were an hour of 5 questions.
Well, thank you so much. It's LaToya and all the panelists. It's an honor to be spending some time with you all this morning or this afternoon on this very important topic. And on behalf of the Metro Office of Family Safety, we are really here to help and to support and to really highlight these issues that impact all of the people we work with. People who are impacted by domestic violence do not have those experiences in a vacuum. So when someone comes in for service provision, they're not just a victim. They are a person who's a parent, a friend, a community member. And so similarly, the experience of racism impacts their ultimate safety. And so it is my hope today that we have robust conversation about the true impact that racism has on victims of domestic violence in particular, and what we can do to reduce that absolutely end. So we're going to ask a few questions of the panelists today. I'm going to begin with all of the panelists introducing themselves as they answer the question. And so our first question here is, tell us a little bit about who you are and your work and what work your organization does in the community, followed by how does racism impact or inform your anti-domestic violence work? And our first panelist will be Alex Chambers with Free Hearts.
Hi, my name is Alex Chambers. I'm a founding member and volunteer with Free Hearts, an organization of formerly incarcerated women advocating for incarcerated women and their families. And I organize the Love and Justice Project, a Free Hearts initiative focused on fighting the prosecution and incarceration of survivors of domestic and sexual violence in the state. I come to this work as someone who started volunteering in Tennessee jails and prisons 15 years ago, but it wasn't until I started volunteering at the Davidson County Jail with women several years ago that I heard resonance with their stories and my own as a survivor of gender violence. We know a majority of incarcerated women have experienced domestic and or sexual violence prior to their incarceration. But I also heard obstacles that were not a part of my experience as a white woman with resources and no conviction history. The Love and Justice Project, we currently have 2 defense campaigns for survivors fighting for their freedom, and they're women who've been punished for surviving the abuse they experienced. We are also supporting survivors filing for clemency. We do letter writing, and we also have commissary funds to help survivors buy necessities. Dismantling institutional racism is central to our work because survivors are often criminalized because they are Black or people of color. Black women are incarcerated at twice the rate of white women, while they also have experienced higher rates of domestic violence and femicide. Criminalization is the process of constructing what is considered to be a crime and who is considered to be a criminal through legislation and passing laws, as well as enforcement and prosecution of these laws. And so we see through both of those processes that Black women and women of color are less likely to be considered victims deserving of protection, more likely to be considered aggressors. And if you have a conviction history, you're often even more likely to be criminalized because that's used against you.
Thank you, Alex, for your great introduction and sharing more information about Free Hearts. So next up, we have Sparkle Johnson, a former resident of the Weaver Domestic Violence Center. Welcome, Sparkle.
Hello, everyone. How are
Hi.
you all?
Good.
So my name is Sparkle Johnson. I am a domestic violence survivor and overcomer. I have a nonprofit entitled Super Women Inc. We help not only women victims, but men victims of domestic violence as well. I'm also working on a book, single mother of 4 amazing children. But the message that Super Women Inc. would love to send out, and some of the things that we do is just cater to the need of the community. We know one of the key factors in a lot of victims staying in domestic violence situations is economics. So what we do is try to combat that with just any needs that they may have. We do food drives, back to school drives, just being a service and a support. If they do step away, we step in the courtrooms with them so they'll know that they're not alone. Hospital visits, babysit, whatever we need to do to be that support to let them know that you can survive, you can overcome, and life does still shine brightly after survival.
Thank you so much, Sparkle, for that wonderful introduction. Next up, we have Damien Talley, who is the VP of Domestic Violence Services for the YWCA of Middle Tennessee. So welcome, Damien.
Thank you. As she said, I'm Damien Talley, Vice President of Domestic Violence Services at YW. My main purpose here is fulfilling the YW's mission of empowering, eliminating racism, empowering women, and promoting peace, justice, freedom, and dignity for all. One of the ways we do that, our main focus is, from my perspective, is running the 65-bed domestic violence shelter, our Weaver Center here in Nashville, and our 24-hour helpline. That's 1-800-334-4628, if you weren't aware. Racism impacts the work I do, or how I adjust it, by trying to remove barriers that women or any individual may face in seeking help. And that's been one of the huge barriers for women, racism based. A good amount of women who, of color anyway, are not seen as victims worthy of protection. And we use our resources here at the Weaver Center to eliminate one of those barriers. So that's one of the main ways that racism impacts the work that we do here.
Thank you, Damien. And finally, we have Chai Singamani. I want to make sure I said your name properly, so please correct me if I didn't. And I'm sorry?
You were close.
Oh, well, I'm glad I was close. So you can, I will make sure I get it right moving forward. Chai is a legal immigration attorney at the Legal Aid Society of Middle Tennessee. So welcome, Chai, and give us a little bit about the work you do with legal aid and how racism informs it.
So I'm Chai Sangpumani, and I am the lead immigration attorney at Legal Aid Society of Middle Tennessee and the Cumberlands. And I direct the Survivors Immigrant Legal Project. And what we do is we provide immigration legal services to survivors of domestic violence, sexual assault, or stalking. So we handle U visas and Violence Against Women's Act self-petition. So essentially we are helping our clients get the legal status to help them gain independence and safety. And so how does racism affect my work and the work that my team does is that working with immigrants, their experience, they experience racism pretty frequently. Not only in their relationships, but in the system as well. And with relationships, the way that the immigration laws have been developed is they were developed really as a way of preventing excluding certain people. So as history evolved, a law would pop up, say, we are not going to allow this group of people to become citizens. So historically, immigration laws have a racist beginning. So with our clients, they experience a lot of barriers that prevent them from accessing the immigration system. And we kind of help them navigate and help them access the services in a way that will allow them to be more independent.
Thank you, Chai. And so Chai, you're going to lead with the next question as well. We're going to go in a reverse order here. So our next question is that we know the experience of domestic violence is one of terror and trauma for survivors and the people that support them. We also know that the experience of racism is one of trauma and terror, not only on an individual basis, but in the community in general. Specifically, how does racism and domestic violence intersect to cause harm to communities? Some examples, just to lead our discussion, are officer-involved shootings on unarmed people of color, or domestic violence victims simply engaging in traditional criminal justice system services. So Chai, you can take the lead on that one.
Okay, so domestic violence is about power and control. And the way that our immigration systems have been developed, it gives a lot of power to the US citizen spouse, the perpetrator, the abuser. And so that gives that person a lot of power in access to information and access to services. And so where the intersection comes in and how it affects the community is that many times the immigrant survivor is reliant on the abuser for information. And it could be they are the interpreter, they are the gatekeeper to access to things. And so the survivor may not know that they are safe to call the police, that they are entitled to protection from the police. So they may not call the police because they are fearful that there will be negative repercussions for them and their family. by trying to access the protections. And they don't necessarily know what kind of services are out there for their safety. And so what that results in is a community that is fearful of gaining and accessing services, and which means they put themselves in more danger or they prolong their dangerous situation.
Thank you. Damien, same question.
For us here at the shelter, one of the biggest intersections that we see is women not willing to contact police just because of recognizing things that they see in the media or in their day-to-day lives, being afraid to engage with police officers, one from fear of not being believed. Another fear that they may have is harm to their potential from their perpetrator of the violence against them. Just because they want to get out of that situation doesn't mean they want a violent circumstance to come and interact with their abuser. So just helping women get past that barrier or that recognition. That's where a huge intersection that I see on a regular basis.
Thank you, Damien. Sparkle.
Yes, so first, thank you for asking that question. I think that's the most important question asked throughout the whole thing so far. So I think there's fear on both sides, men and women. It's fear for because of the brutality that's going on. Honestly, we, and when I say we, the Black community, we don't know who's who. So if we call the police, we don't know what we're getting. We don't know who we're getting. Are we getting someone that's for us or against us? We know brutalities have happened, police brutalities have happened with men and women, not just men. So we don't know if calling the police will cost us our lives or our abusers' lives, or an innocent bystander, someone who may be trying to stop. We just don't know. So yes, especially with such the sensitive season that we're in, a lot of people are not really too quick, or a lot of Black people are not too quick to call the police right now because we just don't know what we're getting. We're hoping for the best, but we're also hoping it doesn't cost us our lives. I will say this, we do know that all cops are not bad cops, but it's the fear of the unknown. All of them are not bad cops, but all of them aren't the best either. And we just don't know. So sometimes because our abusers are familiar to us, we rather go ahead and suffer the consequences of the familiar versus fear of the unknown.
Thank you, Sparkle. It's remarkable. It's very important to hear that context from the community. And lastly, we have Alex.
Yes, I think the extension of both arresting survivors is traumatic, as well as prisons. There's no such thing as a trauma-informed prison, because prisons are themselves about power and control. And the same way that an abuser will exert power and control, prisons tend to do the same thing. They control your movements. They control when you go to sleep, what you can eat. And I think that's another piece, that our reliance on prisons, but especially what survivors who are criminalized and go through this process are essentially moved from one prison to another, and are re-traumatized regularly. And similarly, I think in the court space, for those that are prosecuted in court, there's a sort of systemic victim blaming that is very powerful, that happens, that is also traumatizing, making someone either see their abuser being charged alongside the abuser, sitting next to them, or transporting next to them regularly, and then having to go through and relive your experience, but having that whole experience undermined and diminished is not real or not sufficient to have you considered to be a victim who needs healing, as opposed to someone who should be punished.
Thank you so much, Alex, for that context, especially for how victims are treated engaging in the system when they're treated as offenders. So that's really important context for people to hear. So you also have the next question, the first of the next question. And that question is, what is being done, whether it's policy, grassroots organizing, or direct service level, to address racism and the impact on anti-domestic violence work?
Yeah, I think, I'm not sure, it's been in the news recently, more nationally, but that there was an organization in Wisconsin that, an anti-domestic violence organization that put up a Black Lives Matter sign. And I believe they also signed on to this letter that the Wisconsin Coalition put together that really sort of said we need a reckoning within the movement to address the heavy reliance on police and prisons, given the impact and the systemic racism, the impact that that has had on the most marginalized victims. And as a result of them just putting up a Black Lives Matter sign, law enforcement cut off ties. They lost funding from, I think, the county, and sort of showing that I think that the reckoning is big and important, and also that those relationships can be a bit tenuous. And so, yeah, I think that's a larger conversation that's starting to happen nationally within the movement.
Thank you, Alex. I am familiar with that story, and it's scary to see how vulnerable that ultimately makes it for victims of domestic violence seeking support. Next is Sparkle. Same question. What is being done to address the intersection of domestic violence and racism, whether that's policy, grassroots, or direct service level?
Honestly, right now, a lot of people are doing a lot of talking. They are doing a lot of speech. They're doing a lot of peaceful protests, but I cannot say comfortably that that's enough. I have to say that right now, I feel like nothing is being done. A lot is being said. We need to, instead of just hearing everyone say that we're on the side of right and we're against wrong and Black Lives Matter, I think the community needs to see that. We need to see police officers, and we see a few, but not enough. We need to see police officers of different race standing with domestic violence advocates and DA prosecutors. We need to see them. We need to see them in the community more than just talking. We can say, we can hear officers say all day, Black Lives Matter. They can have 50 signs in their yard, but we need to see them put the action behind it. Because we do know, and I'm not negligent to the fact that we do have some violent protesters and things like that happen, and I don't take away from the fact that some officers may be in fear. But I promise you, and I can reassure you, being just simply a member of the community, that if we see you standing with us, everybody doesn't want to hurt you, just like you don't want to hurt everybody else. But it's a little bit of time out for speaking on it, and speaking on it only. It's time for us to see the action, see the work, but most importantly, see the unity. We don't just want to hear it, we want to see it, we want to feel it. Because as I said before, we don't know who's who. So show us who you are. The common denominator in police brutality, discrimination, and domestic violence is the violence. Domestic violence survivors, advocates, and I don't want to speak for everyone on the panel, but I feel strongly that one thing we all want is to cease all violence, not just in domestic relationships, but unified. Since the pandemic, crime rate has went crazy in children on up, race, gender, creed, it doesn't matter. Everybody's going crazy. And so we just need to be unified, and we need to see it. Talking is good, but we need to see it.
Thank you, Sparkle. Next, we have Damien, same question.
On the direct service level, me as the VP here at the Weaver Domestic Violence Shelter, one of the things that we're looking into implementing or making sure that we're addressing is making sure that our staff is trained on specific traumas, race-based traumas, and recognizing policies that we may be implementing ourselves as far as exits or things like that that may inadvertently put women of color in a particular situation or back into a particularly violent situation because our exiting policies, because of a circumstance, didn't take into account their traumas. So just reassessing our the way we look at how we're addressing the trauma of the women that we bring in the shelter, so that they won't face the same circumstances, the same barriers to care or resources that they faced previous to even reaching out and getting the help. So just looking at all of our policies from the top down, from a direct service level.
Thank you, Damien. I'm sure that's very beneficial, and any survivors or people who know survivors on the call would be really comforted to hearing that and trusting the referral process should you ever be in the position to have to refer someone to shelter. So next up we have Chai.
Yeah, so I have been practicing for over 15 years and have kind of seen the ebb and flow of the resources and focus on immigrant survivors. You know, there was a time when there was a lot of money and grants that were given for services directly for immigrant survivors. And so what I've come to realize is this is a continuous work in progress. You know, we have the Violence Against Women's Act, which is a very large statute, but part of that statute created a specific immigration form of relief for immigrant victims to petition on their own without their abuser knowledge. So that was in 2000. And since then, we've gotten the U visa, and but the rhetoric has changed. Well, not necessarily changed. There's always been negative anti-immigrant rhetoric, but it's gotten to a point where it's very open, and you know, it's an ebb and flow of the hostilities. And so, like I said before, that means it's a continuous work in progress. You know, we win some policies and we lose some policies. And we just have to keep in mind that this is not going to ever be resolved completely. And so we have to keep educating ourselves and keep acknowledging that there is an issue that we have to address.
Thank you. So our last question is actually very similar to a question someone has posted in the chat. So I'm going to ask both of those questions at the same time in order to get the gist of the robust question being asked. So the initial question is, what is your call to action for this audience? What can we do right now? And what can we do in the long term to dismantle racism and domestic violence? And the question that was actually asked in the chat is, so what can community members do to actually make a difference besides protesting, writing letters, voting, and talking? So I see those as being very similar questions. So decided to just ask them both together. Hope that didn't throw y'all for a loop, panelists. But first one up is Chai.
Yes, so my call to action is to remember to be empathetic. We all, most of us are service providers, and we're going to see people from all walks of life with very different experiences. And it sometimes is, with the work that we do become desensitized to trauma at certain points. And we have to remind ourselves that not everybody shares the same experiences or shares the same pathways through their lives. And just, taking a step back and remembering that, someone's experience doesn't necessarily have to make sense to you and doesn't necessarily have to be believable to you based on your experience. What they experienced and what they suffered can be very traumatic to them and maybe not necessarily to someone else. And so I think if we remember to be empathetic, that will allow us to be better listeners and better service providers. And long-term wise, I think we just need to continue talking and acknowledging that racism exists. Because I think in the past, it's always been taboo to even say, that racism exists. And I do see a change that we are becoming more aware and more empowered to talk about it and to address it. And we need to keep doing that.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that answer, Chai. Next, of course, we're going in reverse order. So we have Damien.
For me, I think my call to action would be bold in addressing the circumstances. Don't be afraid to address that there is a problem. I think that's one of the biggest problems, is just not wanting to address that there is one, and continue engaging. It gets wearisome from time to time when we all seem to be aware of the problem, but it just doesn't seem to want to go away, or there's certain individuals who are dedicated to the status quo or are comfortable in the circumstances that we are in. So just being bold in that, in addressing the circumstances, being ready to take action, and just staying engaged regardless of how wearisome it can be.
Thank you, Damien. Sparkle, what can we do now and what can we do in the long term to address this issue?
What we can do now and long term is a little less politics and a little bit more passion. I said it in my previous answer. We want to see it. The community want to see it. Let's host some unified community events. They don't have to be titled Black Lives Matter, All Lives Matter. It doesn't even have to be entitled Domestic Violence. Let's just hold a unified event continuously, not just while something is going on, because truth be told, it's always something going on. And we all hold on this panel, and the people that are on here that are viewing, we're watching them introduce themselves from all over the place with different titles, but we all have a story to tell. We all have a reason to believe what we believe. And none of us was born with the titles or positions we have now in our careers or as an adult. So a little less politics, a little bit more passion. Let's hold these unified community events, and let's see the work done. A little more, let's see our white officers playing with our little Black children. Let's see our friends of different race, gender, creed, and religion. Let's see it. Let's see it. Let's see it. We hear it all the time, but if we don't see it, it's hard for us to believe it. Let's just see it. Let's just, and we always talk about Nike. Let's just do it. Let's do the work together. If we see a brother or sister, doesn't mean Black or white. Let's be clear. a brother or sister is somebody who stands with you in unison. Let's just do it for everybody. Period.
Period. Well, thank you so much for that wonderful answer, Sparkle. And last for this question, we have Alex, and then the next few questions will be questions that have come from the audience. And I just want to say here, for the sake of time, we hope to be able to answer every question that comes up from the audience, but just in case we aren't, we'll make sure to get the questions to the panelists to be able to have a response posted in some way possible, or sent out some way possible with by the YWCA, of course. All right, so Alex.
Yeah, some immediate things you can do for survivors in Tennessee who are in prison is help us in supporting them. I think reaching out across prison walls is really important. It's sort of the basis of any work that we do. And so we're working, people can send letters or become a pen pal. And I believe Hannah has that information. And if not, I can add it into the chat. And as well as support for the defense campaigns that we currently have going, which you can learn more about at theloveandjusticeproject.com. And then I think on a regular basis, I would just encourage folks to, when you're watching the news and you see cases that come up where a woman is arrested for violence against an intimate partner, we know statistically that women are more likely to use violence against someone they know in defense if they're being abused. And so questioning like what's behind this, as opposed to just sort of the image of this person as a criminal. And as well as I think in cases of women who are arrested alongside their intimate partner for child abuse, we've seen a lot of cases where women are charged under failure to protect in a way that men aren't, because their abuser is also harming their child and they're being charged for being unable to control the abuse of another. So yeah, those are just some of the immediate actions.
Thank you, Alex. So now I'm moving to the questions that are coming from the chat. The first question is, if our city ever adopted a community policing delivery system, domestic violence interventionists would work in partnership with police and be called on to help settle domestic violence disputes police are now called in to resolve. Any thoughts on how you view police and domestic violence specialists working together, such that we might not have to put people through the criminal justice system if we did not have to? What would that collaborative partnership with police look like? I'm gonna jump in here and be a pretend panelist just for a second, just because in the space that we are in with the Family Safety Center and the Metro Office of Family Safety, that is the core to our mission, is essentially to ensure that victims of domestic violence are safe and offenders are held accountable. And we do that through direct service provision, as well as through partnerships with any entity that domestic violence victims or victims of interpersonal violence in general interface with. And so an example of that is our high-risk intervention panel. And that panel, a group of service providers, the YWCA, the District Attorney's Office, law enforcement, and several other nonprofit partners and system partners come together to address the highest risk domestic violence cases in the county. And part of the reason for coming together on that multidisciplinary team is that sometimes one of us may not be the best to approach a victim of domestic violence. Maybe they don't want to call 911, but we have some really important information they need to know about their case. By us coming together for that, everyone's getting the message, and the person who's most likely able, or the entity that's likely able to reach a victim, can, in a way that doesn't traumatize them, it doesn't make them have to repeat things a whole bunch of times. It just really creates this robust system of all the partners hearing each other's lane of the work and ensuring that victims are getting the services and support that they need. And so on behalf of the Office of Family Safety, I just wanted to lead with that because that is something that is a unique model. It's a family justice center model. And the idea behind the Family Justice Center is that if you're a victim of interpersonal violence, you don't want to have to go to this place over here to get counseling and then over here to talk to a detective. And then your children need counseling or to meet with someone because they have also been abused. If you know you have to go to all those 15 different places, you don't know where to start. And sometimes you just end up not starting. So the idea behind a Family Justice Center, specifically our Family Safety Center located here in Nashville, 610 Murfreesboro Pike. The idea is that you get that support in one place and are connected to all of the resources at what point. So now I'll go back to being the moderator. So in this order, I think we ended with Alex previously. So Alex, you start.
I think part of the issue is that we don't have answers, that we need more experimenting. We need to figure out what would work beyond our current imagination. And I think there are still concerns and questions about community policing models, that they reinstitute similar, have the same issues. And what would it look like to have a completely non-police involved response? And I mean, we do these in other ways in our lives. And we have other organizations and communities we might go to. And so I think really a lot of this work right now is like starting from an imagination beyond what we currently have and asking, what could things really be like? And what would survivors want and need? I think that's another piece, is really centering survivors and making survivors the forefront of any solutions. And also not letting our current imagination constrain that, saying that our investments currently don't have to be our investments forever, and giving ourselves the space to think really big.
Thank you, Alex. That's wonderful. You're getting a lot of quotes here in the chat box. So I think you have some quotables there that are really good to sustain this conversation. Next, we have Sparkle. So I know it was a robust question. And with these, with the chat box questions, if all panelists don't necessarily have to answer if you don't feel like your answer wouldn't repeat what the last person said or anything, but definitely offering space for everyone to do that. So Sparkle, would you like me to repeat the question, or do you think you got it?
I think I got it.
Perfect. Okay.
So I do have to back up the MNPD on this one, because I do know that domestic violence calls are one of the most dangerous calls. Again, just like the community have fear of the unknown, of course, officers, we've seen the reports where as soon as the officer pull up, someone's shooting out of the house, from the back of the house, from the roof, and officers are losing their lives. So they don't know, and they definitely don't want to jeopardize calling someone in as an interventionist all the time. Now, I will also say I have a couple of officers who have worked with my organization and helped serve the community. And there have been only 2 instances in the 4.5 years that my organization has been running, where an officer that I worked with was like, hey, I'm outside this one home. We know that he's done this, but we can't get her to talk. Can you talk to her? And so those type of interventions, we could say that we needed more, because both of those did have positive results. But it's just the fear of the unknown. Or what kind of questions would the MNPD have to answer if they called an interventionist such as myself or Pass the Beauty organization, or Victims to Victory is other organizations out there, as mentioned, called one of us out there and we ended up shot and killed. What kind of questions would MNPD have to answer then? So it's kind of risky business, but we're all willing to do whatever it takes.
Thank you, Sparkle. I'm going to add here, I see some comments in the chat about whether or not there is a domestic violence unit. I know the Metro Nashville Police Department does have a domestic violence unit with its own captain, its own detectives who investigate domestic violence. And they also have civilian staff or non-law enforcement staff who are also part of the police department, who provide counseling and advocacy support. And they are with the violence intervention program. That's also with Metro MNPD. I can't speak for wider out, but I do know that here in Nashville, we have specialized units, both in our law enforcement and in our district attorney's office, as well as the domestic violence court circuit. So we have 3 specialized domestic violence judges there. So that's something cool about Nashville, to get those same folks together working on that work. So just added that little tidbit of information in there. Next up, we have Damien.
I was having issues with the mute button. I fully support reimagining how our police interact with citizens on all fronts, especially this one. Whenever there's violence and is a possibility, or the possibility of unnecessarily adding someone to the criminal justice system, I think that all options need to be on the table, and we definitely, in all circumstances, need to look at how we can alleviate those circumstances. So I'm all for reimagining, repurposing resources to make sure that that's a possibility.
Thank you, Damien. And next up, we have Chai.
Yeah, so I think any type of collaboration needs to be a holistic approach, instead of just addressing the end result of a domestic violence situation. And we need to look at preventing domestic violence. What kind of resources are needed to prevent and address the social factors that cause domestic violence. And it's going to require big thinking and probably a lot of money, but we need to think beyond what the solutions that we have now, because apparently it's not working. We need to become more creative. And at the end of the day, we have people, not only the service providers, but also the survivors themselves, that we need to take care of and make sure that everyone's safe. So just a holistic, big picture approach.
Thank you, Chai. So we have time for one more question. And that question is, as individuals, we are limited in what we can do. What organizations can you recommend which work towards specific goals or have a record of concrete accomplishments? And I'll just add to that, other than the ones that are represented here. So Chai, you go ahead with that one.
Okay, so I am on the board of TURC, which is the Tennessee Immigrants Refugee Rights Coalition, and they are a grassroots organization that that covers all of Tennessee, and so they have been on the front lines of really trying to change the rhetoric of anti-immigrant sentiment. And so I would highly recommend getting involved with them. They also have a 501c4 arm that is trying to get people engaged in the political system and really educate not only the public about immigrant issues, but also their members, their immigrant members, of how to become more involved in the community. So if you are interested in immigrant issues, whether it's, involving domestic violence or any other issues related to immigration, they would be the organization to contact and get involved with.
Thank you. Damien.
Besides ours, I'd say the Equity Alliance, which has been doing tremendous work over the past few years, just extraordinary work across Tennessee in regards to addressing racism, voter rights, just voter turnout, just all around. The Equity Alliance has been phenomenal in addressing all issues, all misrepresented people, underrepresented individuals across the state of Tennessee.
Thank you. Sparkle.
Yeah, I was responding to a text from one of the teachers from the kids' school. I'm sorry, can you please repeat the question?
No problem. My mother's work is never done and doesn't have breaks, so I totally get it. So the question is just to repeat the whole thing. As individuals, we are limited in what we can do. What organizations can you recommend which work towards specific goals, have a specific or concrete accomplishments?
So of course I'm gonna say Super Women Inc. We are not, so we're very just, humble, down to earth. We just want to help. We just want to serve. That's all we want to do. And we know sometimes domestic violence survivors, for the most part, are now working in criminal justice of some sort, but we don't. We look like today's victims, and so we're the face that says, "Hey, we survived, and you can too." Yes, we have won awards and recognitions, but honestly, we care less. As long as one life gets saved, that is our reward. We celebrate that one life, that mother with her children. We've had a father, a single father of 2 children, whose wife was just out to kill him in every way she possibly could, but she would call the police and say she was a victim. And he went to jail over false pretense for a little while. But all those situations, just saying all of that to say Super Women Inc., we do whatever we need is necessary. We have Victims to Victory. Now, they are one of those grassroots organizations that go, and I've seen them fight a peaceful protesting fight way before everything that's going on now. But strictly for laws with related to domestic violence. The CEO of that, Miss Tiffany Hawkins, have called me 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, like, "Hey, did you hear this law they're trying to pass at 6 o'clock in the morning? We have to go down there and do something." So yeah, those are some humble little organizations that's not known really on a national platform, that just truly want to help any and everywhere. We have traveled to Memphis together, Victims to Victory, Super Women Inc., and Past the Beauty with Centoya Franklin, another survivor. We have all traveled to Memphis to help just 2 families before. So aside of waiting from laws to pass and court dates to arise, we're going to get up and go. We'll watch each other's children so we can go and help another family who don't have the resources that we have till they get to where they need to be for their to regain their independence, to escape the abuse, and to live a full life.
Thank you so much, Sparkle. And last, we have Alex. Send us home, Alex.
Yeah, this is a national organization, Survived and Punished. They organize around ending the criminalization of survivors. And one of the main reasons I would recommend them is they offer a great analysis of the problem, but they also continually put out resources about reimagining what solutions, interventions might look like outside of police and prison involvement.
Thank you so much, Alex, and thank you, Chai and Damien and Sparkle and Latricia and Hannah running behind the scenes for all of your dedication to this issue and throughout the year, not just during Domestic Violence Awareness Month. On behalf of the Office of Family Safety, I want to say thank you to everyone for allowing us to be a part of this. If there's anyone listening or you know anyone listening who is in need of support with orders of protection, I know we're still, seems like COVID just does not want to go anywhere. So we are still exercising distancing, but we are still providing services at the Family Safety Center located at 610 Murfreesboro Pike. I posted that information in the chat and Hannah will be sending it out along, of course, with the information from the YWCA, but I just wanted to let you all know that we are still open operating. And if you are at home and in need of some support, you can utilize our chat, our live chat feature, as well as give us a call and get some support that you may need. That's at 615-880-1100. You see here on the slide, the YWCA, all of the YW's contact information is listed here, as well as Free Hearts, the Office of Family Safety and Legal Aid Society. So again, thank you everyone for taking time out of your day to talk about this important issue. I'm LaToya Townsend. Have a fabulous rest of the day.
Bye. Thank you all. This was awesome. I enjoyed it.
Me too. Me too.
Thank you, everyone. You'll have a great day.
You
Oh,
too.
thank you. Do you want us to log off now or do we hang out for a couple of seconds?
Log off. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Thanks. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thanks for moderating. It was great.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Oh, no problem. Thank you.